paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Who win it now?
Beyond reality radio.
It's Monday on the West Coast, Tuesday on the East. Many of you are stuck somewhere in between. Welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with myself, Jason Hawes, and the always awesome JV Johnson.
Problem with running a best of program 2 nights in a row, last Thursday and Friday, and then having a weekend, is that I lose all track of time. I lose all track of
what day it is.
Days, information.
I've had that too.
Yeah, it's just like it's like this blank. I don't know. This I guess it's a state of zen in a way. Clear my mind of anything important and try to just make it through. To the next meal. It's kind of what I do all weekend, and then I go, whoa, we got a show tonight.
Well, and it's funny because I kept on thinking all day today that today was Sunday.
Yeah. See, all messed up, right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
I'm totally lost in it.
Welcome to Monday/Tuesday.
Yeah, well, hey, welcome to Beyond Reality Radio, everybody. It's Jason Hawes and JV Johnson. If you haven't yet, head over to facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio and like the Facebook page for us. Then head to BeyondRealityRadio.com. You can find all the great stations we are on across the country. That list is constantly being updated with new stations being added all the time. You can also download the free smartphone apps, which allows you to listen live, catch past shows, join the online chat, all on the go. Or just listen right from the website. Click the Listen Live tab right there, and you can listen right while hanging out at the website. If you download the show from iTunes or anywhere else, do us a favor and just rate it for us. Makes it easier for people to find.
So I say we always have great guests on the show, and we do, and we always have really interesting topics on the show. Tonight, however, we're going to have what is going to be not just an interesting topic, but a mysterious one, and I would say an educational one as well. We're going to be talking with Dr. Stephen Flowers about the Fraternies Saturni.
You could say it before we went live.
I know, but I knew
you said
I was
it fine.
I knew I was going to mess it up.
To say it because I'm going to screw this up.
Which is effectively that's Latin for the Brotherhood of Saturn, and it's a.
Why don't we just stick with that then?
It would be a lot easier to say, right? It's based on a book that he's written of the same name, and this is a mysterious and secret society that formed in Germany in the early part of the 20th century, right after World War I. A lot of weird stuff was going on in Germany around that time as they were suffering from the effects of the horrendous losses that they suffered as a part of World War I. So it'll be interesting to talk to Stephen tonight about this. He's done extensive studying about this and many other topics that touch on occultism, and we're going to get knee deep into it when we bring him in just a little bit. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a great show. A lot of different things have been going on the news. I don't know if you've been paying attention, JV, but, well, and you're from New York State, so tell me. My grandfather lives in the Highland Park area of Rochester, and but a neighborhood in Rochester, New York, has been plagued by maddening, mysterious sounds for the past year and is now contending with a second acoustic irritation. Yes, you heard that right, yeah. The people of Highland Park made news in late June when residents declared to a local newspaper that they were fed up with hearing a mysterious sound that had been tormenting them for months. Since that time, an area expert managed to come close to cracking the case before things took an even stranger turn. Ming Lun Lee was enlisted by the newspaper to determine the nature of the sounds by way of recordings obtained by both himself and the witnesses. And although the audio engineer couldn't quite match the sound of a specific known source, he was able to possibly determine that it was originating from a small power plant in the area. But while he was working on that, his investigation sort of took another weird turn as a second sound appeared on the scene. According to a new report, the second noise was recorded by a resident named Tracy Hansen, who says that she hears it at random times during the day and that her neighbors also are experiencing the odd sound. Based on how it seems to change in tone depending on where she is and when she hears it, she speculates that it's coming from up high, but conceded that she has no idea what may be causing it. But for Lee's part, he observed the second sound as well, and he says that it's different from the original noise that led to his investigation, meaning that the Highland Park residents could now seem to have two mysterious sounds on their hands.
Wow. These mysterious sounds are being reported all over the world, and many of them have been proven to be fake. You see some of these YouTube videos, and they do research on them. They realize the sound is just being played from some type of audio speaker, and it's from a movie or whatever, and people try to pretend it's just ambient sound. But there are some that are still baffling scientists and local officials. Can't figure out where it's coming from.
Now, and it'd be interesting to see what they're able to figure out with this. And of course, there's those weird hums that people hear that they say is coming from the earth and so forth. But I don't know, man. It's weird. I gotta ask my grandfather if he's heard anything like this, because he's right there.
It'd be interesting to know if anybody local has. Interesting, yeah. I know Canada has a whole lot of reports of strange sounds filling the sky, and nobody can. Trumpet noises.
That's probably
could be moose.
The trumpet noises. We're talking the rapture now.
Yes, exactly. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Oh man! All right. So, and one more thing, though, I fill you in on this because you remember I was in Hawaii during the tsunami that hit Japan in 2011, and we had gotten out of there after the tsunami hit us in Hawaii. And I refused to go back to do the reveal because everybody's saying, "Oh, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine." And upon talking to a scientist now over here in New England, he said, "Well, he goes, I want to tell you that the radiation is going to go as far as the wind can travel." And so I chose not to go back and do the reveal out there. Decided to do it from FaceTime. I figured that was a little safer. Well, now the horror meltdown in 2011. That was sparked by a massive tsunami causing waves that overwhelmed the Fukushima nuclear plant. Despite the fears about the radioactive particles possibly entering the food and drink chain, the World Health Organization insisted the risk outside Japan was low. But now it's revealed that wine made in the West Coast U.S. states since the meltdown contain radiation from the accident's fallout. So wine coming from the West Coast.
That's not good for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's not going to be good for wine producers, the vineyards in the West Coast that are selling wine all over the world, not just the country, if people think there's radiation in that wine.
Well, they said it was showing up in the sushi and stuff that was out there, too, and the fish. So but researchers at the French National Center for the Scientific Research reported that finding this week. The radioactive material will most likely be present as it was carried in clouds to the United States, which then entered the water system through rain. Areas of Fukushima, of course, are still strictly off limits to humans due to the toxic levels of radiation. But last year, there were these crazy pictures that had emerged of these raging packs of wild boars, the contaminated wild boars that lived exclusively in that zone. And poachers were actually drafted to send in and slaughter the creatures after they started roaming to surrounding towns. But I think these stories are just going to keep on getting bigger and bigger over time because I think there's still a lot going on with it.
Yeah, they've been talking about these radiation clouds in the atmosphere, high up in the atmosphere, and they'll eventually settle somewhere, and we'll start seeing the effects of it, which I guess is what's happening now. Got to be cautious. I mean, I don't know if these are levels of radiation that have any serious consequence to them, but it can't be good for you. I know that.
I'm sure enough of it is going to be bad. It definitely won't be a good thing. That's for sure.
All right, so let's go to break, and when we come back, we'll bring in Dr. Stephen Flowers. We're going to talk about the Brotherhood of Satan, or excuse me, Saturn.
Jeez.
That's a different one.
Oh my gosh! All right,
man, I'm having all sorts of trouble. It's Monday.
The night's still young. You got all week to straighten it out. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break. More to come. You listen to Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Welcome back to the show. It's Beyond Reality Radio with Jason and JV. Write down the phone number in case you want to join our conversation later. It's 844-687-7669. Our guest tonight is Dr. Stephen Flowers. He's author of the book called the Fraternies Saturni, which is translated to the Brotherhood of Saturn. And we welcome Stephen to the show. Hey, great to have you on tonight, Stephen.
Hello, how are you doing? I'm glad to be here.
We're doing great. Thanks for coming on.
I'd be doing a lot better if I had an easier time pronouncing all these things. I'll be honest with you. I practiced and I still messed it up the first time I said it on air. But either way, you're the expert, and you're going to tell us all about it. So let's start by just getting some definitions out of the way. What are or were the Fraternies Saturni?
The Fraternies Saturni
is
a magical order in Germany, still exists and is going quite strong still, and began in the 1920s in the Weimar era, really, historically, and then was interrupted, of course, by the Second World War, and then sort of remanifested in 1950, and has been going in one form or another to the present day. It's an initiatory order based on some Masonic structures on the one hand, but it is highly eclectic system of, we might say, occult education in the sense that there's a curriculum of training and development that is outlined in the degree system. And it's led by Gregor A. Gregorius. His magical name was that. His private name was Eugen Grosche, and he died in 1964. But he was the sort of ideologue or genius behind the whole thing.
And you said it's still going strong today?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's still uninterrupted. What happened and why I can publish this book is that in 1971, a professor got a hold of their internal documents that were sold or given to him by a high initiate of the order, and he published them as a kind of study of such kind of groups, and so their secret rituals and things like that were exposed at that point, but their response to that was to sort of rewrite the rituals and retool their system, and so that they could continue to practice forms that were not public. But my work is based entirely on those documents and things from before 1971, and for that reason I was supported by and given support by the present-day initiates of the order in Germany. The book was translated into German early on in the 1990s and has become the kind of introductory text in Germany for people interested in the order even today. They thought I did a job that was to their satisfaction. The preface of the book is written, of the present edition, is written by Frater UD, who is one of the high initiates of the present day Fraternies Saturni.
I think in order to best understand how this organization got its start, it's probably a good idea to kind of outline what was going on in Weimar Germany at the time following the conclusion of World War I and the unbelievably stringent and burdensome consequences placed on Germany by the Allied nations at the Treaty of Versailles. Because that's what set the recipe for a lot of this stuff to happen.
Right. Right. Well, that caused a lot of turmoil and disorder, which allowed for a certain degree of freedom to exist there, especially in Berlin at the time, so that there was not much in the way of law and order there. And so there was a lot of just libertine kind of activities going on, but also just artistic, and that's where all of the great films as works of art, except for D.W. Griffith or someone like that in the United States, we really didn't have, for example, great art in our filmmaking in the 20s per se, but in Germany it was really a fine art had developed in the filmmaking industry. So that's another dimension of what was going on. Sexology got its origins. One of my favorite books is one published by Farrell House called The Voluptuous Panic, which is a kind of a look into the world of Weimar Berlin in this kind of the arts and sex and things of that nature. And I mention it because in the appendix of the book, one of the rituals of the Fraternities Saturni and some of my work on the subject is used as an appendix in that book.
We're talking with Dr. Stephen Flowers, and we're going to continue our conversation in just a few minutes. I want to remind everybody that his website is seekthemystery.com. Stephen, is there another website, or is that the one that you want people to go to get more information about your work?
Well, you can go there. There's a Wikipedia page that someone put up that's pretty good as far as looking into all my works and different things. There's only one. I went through that page and I said, there's really only one glaring inaccuracy. I wouldn't say put things exactly the way that it was put there, but I think that's pretty good if you can have a page like that you can only find one error in, but that's a pretty good resource also. And then I'm also on Facebook under my name, Stephen Flowers, and if people want to get in touch that way, that's fine also.
All right, and when we come back from our break, we're going to get into the book in more detail and the organization in a lot more detail.
Yeah, we're going to have to, because I know very little on this subject, so it's going to be highly interesting. All right, you're listening to Jason and JV on Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Here come the jesters, 1, 2, 3. It's all part of my fantasy. See the crowd dancing in the aisles and singing out loud, yeah.
Welcome back to the show. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Jason and JV. Stop by the website, beyondrealityradio.com. Check out all the things we've got going on there, including the Beyond Reality Radio coffee mug, which is available for sale there. It is one price for the mug, and it includes domestic shipping if you're ordering from overseas, or our friends to the North Canada or Mexico to the south. There is additional charges that you have to contact us for, because we don't know what they are until we check it out.
But it makes your coffee taste so much better.
It really does. There's something about it that just makes the coffee absolutely delicious, or hot chocolate, or whatever you happen to be drinking. It's good for orange juice too, whatever.
A little alcohol in your coffee.
Make your coffee Irish if you need to. Hey, we've got some great shows coming up during the course of the week. Michael Mays will be joining us tomorrow night. He's a cryptid seeker and an author, and we'll be talking about shadow cats, the Black Panthers of North America. These are mysterious creatures that people say they see, that in many cases are denied to exist, and we're going to be talking about them.
And then Wednesday, we've got Douglas Cottrell on, clairvoyant and teacher, spiritual healer. We'll be discussing clairvoyancy, remote viewing, and a lot more when it comes down to that. And we'll also be having Rick Hayes on, a psychic medium and life consultant. And we'll be discussing life as a psychic medium and the reasons for hauntings, signs to know if you are being visited by loved ones in spirit, and the experience to believe.
And then Thursday night, Dr. Dawson Church, who is an author and a researcher, will be joining us to discuss mind to matter issues. We've actually had a few mind to matter things, or mind over matter conversations the last few weeks, and they're always fascinating. So that'll be Thursday night's program right here on Beyond Reality Radio. And remember, Friday night is always a best of, but it's always a great program as well.
Yeah, so make sure you tune in and check it out.
Tonight we're talking with Dr. Stephen Flowers, and we got to bring him back in here because he's the only one that can pronounce all these things we've been talking about. Stephen, I've got to ask for another definition here, because it's a word that comes up often in this conversation. What exactly, by your definition, is occultism?
Occultism. Well, it can be two different things, but in most useful definition is that it is the discovery of and the use of laws and or information which is normally hidden from the conventional human mind or consensus reality. Occultism is, when scholars study it, it is characterized by two different things, and that is that it is information or techniques which have been oftentimes discredited or rejected by the present day way of thinking, or it is information that has yet to be discovered or used by the present day reality or consensus of what is possible or real. And so you'll see something like the information or techniques can shift from one to the other. Things that we now think of as, oh, that's just marketing, or that's just advertising, or that's just psychology, or that's just this or that, or that we have accepted now as being understandable at this point. In the Middle Ages would have been called magic for sure, and even as far back or as recently as the early 20th century, a lot of this kind of thinking or techniques being used for mass manipulation and other things of that nature would have belonged to an occult kind of belief system. But as they get proven or demonstrated and become part of consensus reality, then they transition into normal intellectual world of the society. But so these things shift. It's not one thing is occult and always occult. Something like astrology in the past was considered to be science and something that learned men and engaged in, and this was not considered all that occult. In the Renaissance period, a lot of things we call occult now were scientific, were considered to be very scientific. And so these things shift as far as that's concerned, but the definition being something which is occult, and that's different from something which is esoteric, is eternally something of, and perennially something that is hidden. And so esoteric is more the topic of which scholars like to use for something which is eternally mysterious, whether we're talking a caveman or anybody and everybody living today would have something like how and what are this sort of hidden cosmology that lies behind the workings of the world, things like the Gnostic system of the aeons and so forth and so on. That would be eternally esoteric, because that kind of information would never, it's almost designed not ever to be able to be regularized or normalized. It will always be something that is only available to initiates and people who are able to undergo training and learn of these things and make use of the eternally hidden or esoteric. So the idea of occultism and esotericism sort of oftentimes are used synonymously, but current terminology, as I understand it, would separate the two in that kind of way.
At the formation of the Brotherhood of Saturn, what were the objectives of the group, and do those objectives remain the group's objectives today?
Well, they were probably more hopeful of some kind of dramatic changes, and they saw incredible changes if we were living in the 1920s in Germany, and the situation that you alluded to was a dynamic time. I'd like to say, although it didn't end exactly the way, similarly, the atmosphere of what was going on in Germany in the 1920s was similar to what the United States and Western Europe and so forth in other places experienced in the 1960s. That kind of a dynamism of something big is going to happen, something big is about to happen, and we can somehow guide this thing. And, of course, in Germany, actually, one of the things that gets overlooked, missed, and misunderstood very much in cultural history is the fact that really there was a movement called the Reform Movement, or Reform of Life movement, that began around 1880 and continued up to the advent of the Nazis. And still in Germany, you go down the street and you'll see a store sitting there, it says Reform House. And what is that? What is a Reform House? And you go in there and there's all this homeopathic remedies and herbs and all this kind of stuff, kind of like alternative healing and alternative philosophies and things like that. And that's what this idea of reform meant to them. And that began in the 1880s. And one of the things that, and the Weimar period was really a maturation or flowing forth of that, because most of the people living then had grown up completely within that stimulus. That's shockingly, I don't go into this in the book because I have other books I won't go into this, but things like National Socialism is really a kind of an offshoot of this, an unfortunate one, as it turns out, but a lot of the ideas they forwarded were rooted in this reform movement. For example, the big thing about Nazism, people think it's the things you think it's about. But really, one of the major thing about it was the abolition of interest. Abolition of earning money by interest in banks and so forth. And that was considered to be the root of social ills and so forth. So it was a real reform that way. And that was the reason why they really had to be, from the Western perspective, from the Western European and American perspective, had to be destroyed. I mean, that was their chief sin. But it was rooted in this kind of reform mentality. And most of the Nazis themselves grew up in this world. I mean, they were born around 1900 as a generation, and they grew up with these ideas. That's why Hitler was a teetotaling, anti-vivisectionist, vegetarian, who up until he signed his tax papers, dictator of Germany or whatever it was said, artist. I'm a painter. He's an artist. And it's a kind of a new age guy, I mean, as far as his personal habits and things of that nature are concerned. So this is the crazy world of Weimar Germany that this Fraternies Saturni grows out of. Gregorius himself was a left-wing sort of radical guy, and took part in attempts to overthrow the government from a left perspective, which, of course, again, when we look at the Nazis, you say, are they right or are they left? Well, they're really left. They're left. They're socialists. They were. We think of them now as the epitome of the right wing, because we pick and choose what issues we want to talk about. But from their perspective, they were really more of a socialist. It was just that instead of basing socialism on class and economics, they based it on biology. That was their idea. And so that is something that plays a part in this world. Gregorius, when he left, when the war ended, he remained or stayed in the eastern zone and cooperated and worked for the East German government and became a member of the Communist Party in order to work there. And then in 1950, he wanted to renew his order, and obviously that wasn't going to happen in East Germany, so that's when he came west again and entered West Berlin and began the order again in 1950. But in the first edition of my book, I had to say, I don't know what happened to this. What mysterious goings on between he would be arrested by the Nazis, and then mysteriously he'd be let go. Well, the mystery, the solving of the mystery there was he had so many good contacts in among these people that he was well liked, and that's what happens in these kind of societies. Is it's not really, if you know the right person, you can get away with just about anything. But those kind of people are few and far between, of course. Yeah. Not the average Joe. But he did have connections and was able to escape any kind of negative repercussions in the Nazi regime, and then survived the war and spent time in East Germany, then went west in order to renew his occult activities.
Okay. Our guest is Stephen Flowers, Dr. Stephen Flowers, and we're discussing Fraternities Saturni. And so I'm trying to say the word as well. And a lot more to come. We're going to take a break. You'll listen to Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Matter of conditioning, a matter of fact. You can call me Pavlov's dog. Ring a bell and I'll salivate. How'd you like that? Dr. Landy, tell me you're not just a pedagogue. 'Cause right now I'm lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did. Well, I'm lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did. So I'm lying here. times, and I'm thinking about what I think about. Just listening and re-listening to Smiley Smile, and I'm wondering if this is some kind of creative drought, because I'm lying in bed just like Brian Wilson did. But when I'm lying in bed just like Brian Wilson did. Whoa. And if you wanna find me, I'll be out in the sandbox, just wondering where the hell all the love is gone. I'm playing my guitar.
The book is called the Fraternies Saturni, and I tell you, Dr. Stephen Flowers is our guest. He's the author of this book. This is one of the most difficult titles to pronounce. Will you do it for us correctly?
That's great. So it was originally, that's my title for it, because that's what the book's about. So if someone's looking for the Fraternies Saturni, then the title tells you this is where you need to come. When it was first published, a brilliant businessman in the publishing industry, no longer with us, Carl Weschke of Llewellyn, retitled it Fire and Ice. He said because there's some kind of a fair or some kind of festival up there in Minnesota called Fire and Ice, and he liked that, and but it refers to the Saturnian philosophy of this kind of polarity of the centrifugal and centrifugal forces interacting. He picked up on that, and so retitled the book Fire and Ice. But, that has its weakness, too, because you think, well, what the heck is that? That could be about any dang thing, that's, usually in publishing, say we just title it what the person is looking for. If they're looking for and they're interested in astrology, get astrology in your title. This is Fraternies Saturni. You have to have that's in the title. There you go. So it does have its drawbacks, but any foreign word is going to have its drawbacks. But Fraternies Saturni is.
Yeah,
that's the title.
It does, and we're going to get into more detail. Again, the website is seekthemystery.com. And you've got a lot more work. We've got about a minute here, a little less than a minute before we have to go to our top of the hour break. You've got a lot of other work on that website as well.
Yes, you could I would suggest, however, you can contact me through that Seek the Mystery. If you want to just book all of my books, every book that is available in any way, shape, or form practically is, you can get on Amazon, and including my books that I publish myself through my own publishing company. They're all there, and you can get them if you just search for either my name, of course, Stephen E. Flowers, or the name I write, Germanic traditional things under Edred Thorson is also, of course, where a lot of my work is also under that name.
All right, great. A lot more to come. You're listening to Jason and JV on Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
I've just seen her face, I can't forget the time or place where we just met. She's just the girl for me, and I want all the world to see we've met. Had it been another day, I might have looked the other way, and I'd have never been aware. But as it is,
paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Can't handle the truth! Who would it now?
Beyond reality. Radio.
It's Tuesday on the West Coast. Monday on the West Coast. Tuesday on the East Coast. Many of you are stuck somewhere in between. Welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with myself, Jason Hawes, and the always awesome JV Johnson, who's laughing at me right now.
Well, I'm just laughing because we're both like having trouble with this stuff.
It's Sunday on the West and Friday on the East, and
we're gonna have to do a show and get an expert in on the phenomenon known as Mondayism. Mondayism, because we seem to be experiencing Mondayism tonight.
But have you noticed, though, in the chat room, I've been helping people fix their toilets.
I haven't, but you're the guy to do it.
I am. I mean, hey, I'm a Roto-Rooter guy, and I know this stuff, so people are asking me plumbing questions, and I'm guiding them through the process.
What a guy. All right, well, welcome back to the show, everybody. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Tonight we're talking with Dr. Stephen Flowers about his book, which covers the history, doctrine, and rituals of the magical order of the Brotherhood of Saturn. We're going to bring him back into the program in just a moment. Tomorrow night we've got Michael Mays on. He's a cryptid seeker and an author. We'll be talking about shadow cats, the Black Panthers of North America, which examines the mystery behind the sightings of large, black, long-tailed cats in America. Science says there is no such animal, but people have seen these things, or at least reported seeing these things. And we'll also be talking about Sasquatch. He's a board member of the North American Wood Ape Conservancy.
Sasquatches?
Yeah, Sasquatches.
Sasquatch is a board member?
No, Michael Mays is.
Oh, gotcha.
And
I was really confused.
Yeah, and he's actively involved in obtaining evidence in North America that North America is home to this species, the species known as Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
All right. And then Wednesday, we're going to be talking with Douglas Cottrell, clairvoyant teacher and spiritual healer. And also we'll have Rick Hayes on, a psychic medium and life consultant. So it should be a great show. Make sure you tune in.
And Thursday night, Dr. Dawson Church, who's an author and researcher, will be on discussing his work on mind to matter issues. So we've got a full week of programs. Of course, Friday night is a best of. Our phone number is 844-687-7669 if you would like to join our conversation with Dr. Stephen Flowers about the Brotherhood of Saturn. And again, Dr. Flowers, it's really great to have you on. Let's talk a little bit about you.
Thank you. I discovered that you, before we go on, that you have been victimized by one of the most sinister practices and forces afoot today, and that is the autocorrect function in your computer. I just looked at your website, and it had auto-corrected your fraternitas to fraternities, and that's probably one of the reasons why the title is difficult, or it didn't help any.
I think that may be the cause, and we're gonna blame that, and that's going to be our explanation.
I have that same problem every time I type fraternitas; it corrects it to fraternities.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm very familiar with being plagued by that little imp and demon that's in my machine.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I want to turn the topic to you personally. At what point, tell us a little bit about your career path and how you became interested in this particular topic as it stands.
Oh, I was interested, sort of, like I said, about 1971, thereabouts. Graduated from high school, went to Germany and all of this kind of thing, kind of adventures and whatever, and I was interested in sort of occult things and vampires and all that long before it became popular. I was a monster kid in the 60s, Famous Monsters of Filmland was my Bible, and all of that. So I was interested in, as I matured, in occultism and things of that nature. And one of the things that I read or was looking at was the Encyclopedia of the Unexplained. This is when I was already in college and already interested quite deeply. And in that, there's an article in there about this Fraternies Saturni. And it mentions how secret and hard to find out about them it is, and so forth and so on. And since I had learned German and was able to read German, I'm going to find out about that. That was 1973 or something like that. And so then about 10 years later, I had the opportunity to study in Germany and came in contact with a professor who taught this sort of thing there academically, and so he had all of these resources, and there were others available also while I was in Germany, and so I just scooped them all up, and in the early 80s, and then said this is going to be a book project for me, and that's what it became a few years later. But it was really, when one reads it, and that's why the order, the Fraternies Saturni, likes my book, is that it is a scholarly approach. It is not trying to grind an axe one way or another or tell you this is absolutely the true and right way. It's a sober presentation with copious documentation from original sources about what this group is about, what they believe, think, and how they operate in an objective way. And so for that reason, it is appreciated by the people who are actually doing it in Germany, and then also and others who are. There's an Orient here in North America, and out of Toronto, but that's not really the Fraternies Saturni. It's rather the Ordo Saturni, an offshoot of it from Germany, but that exists here, and they're trying to get the materials in English as much as possible, and that's the big reason why no one but Germans can really be a part of it, is that this voluminous body of material that they have produced over the decades is all in German, and they're in no mood to translate it or to do that, even though they have people who could do that very easily, but they really just want to stay kind of what they are. Because to become a member of this organization, they have an annual conference, and a person who's petitioning to become a member has to show up there in person and present their application, and then they will be told, okay, get back on the train, or the plane, but usually a train, and go back home, and we'll convene in a year somewhere else, and you will come there, and then we'll give you our answer on your application then. And so that's the way they operate. And so,
Stephen, as this group,
so it's not by mail, or it's not by correspondence or on the computer or anything else. Never was, never will be. So that's part of also the mystique of it.
Stephen, as this group was organizing in the 1920s, what was the criteria for membership? Did you have to belong to a certain religion? Did you have to be a certain race? Did you have to have certain political beliefs? What was the criteria?
It is said that at one point, they had what was called, an Aryan paragraph, that, in other words, they didn't accept Jews. But I know for absolute fact that's no longer the case, nor was that really anything that was ever. They were completely, like I said, Gregorius was really a left-wing guy, and I don't know whether that is actually true or not. No one ever objected to that fact that I put in there about from the 1920s. But, of course, that would also be true of Masonic orders and so forth in general, although you wouldn't say that they were, an Orthodox Masonic order. But that was the only thing they had to say. There was not something that was extremely pronounced one way or the other. Again, that's an obscure fact. It's not like a big part of their beliefs or anything like that. It's just part of the time period, right. I suppose.
Right.
But there are no restrictions that I know. Men, women, as a co-Masonic kind of thing.
Did the group have a brother or a sister organization elsewhere in the world? Like, was there something in America that may have been affiliated with this group, or was it strictly a German-based and solely German group?
Yeah, right. Not only just German-based. It was totally and remains that way. Or Germany, Austria, German-speaking world, and their reasoning is not to make it for Germans for that reason. It's just, again, they don't want. How do you communicate and teach someone? That's their problem. I mean, that's what the way they're thinking about it is. Here's our stuff. This is what we do. This is how we operate. That's the objection. And of course, I think there were people at some point who found out about them after 71 who I want to be a part of it because, I know there's all kinds of sex orgies going on and everything. I got to be in that. And so, they said, just go away, do not bother us, And so it remained very elite, very secret. Most people knew each other only in the heyday. They only knew each other by their order names. They didn't use their civilian names, in publications or in meetings or anything like that. And that's a throwback to a time when these kind of organizations, of course, this one also was banned by the Nazis, but that was frequent in Germany, that you could become a member of an organization which was dangerous to be a member of. I mean, it would be made illegal, and to be a member of it would be a crime, and this kind of thing. This was something they lived with in this clear and present reality of life. And so their secrecy was born of that, and also was practiced because it was necessary in many ways until after the Second World War and when Germany becomes what it is now. Now it's not necessary anymore, but it was then, and going back to for centuries before that for these kinds of groups.
Now you mentioned a couple words here in your last answer that we're going to talk about after this break. You mentioned sexual magic and orgies, and this group, the Brotherhood of Saturn, that was a part of what they did, and you're going to explain that for us, Stephen, when we come back from break.
All right. You're listening to Jason and JV on Beyond Reality Radio. The phone number is 844-687-7669. Again, toll free, 844-687-7669. If you have any questions for us or our guest, you're listening to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
I tried to make it Sunday, but I got so damn depressed that I set my sights on Monday and I got myself undressed. I ain't ready for the the altar. But I do agree there's times when a woman sure can be a friend of mine. Will I keep on?
Welcome back to the show. It's Beyond Reality Radio, Jason and JV. Our guest tonight is Dr. Stephen Flowers. We're talking about the Brotherhood of Saturn. Stephen, I teased it before we went to break, but it is an important part of what this group was about, and I'm assuming still is about. You'll have to explain. But there's, in your book, there's a lot of discussion about sexual magic and this whole side of this group that may make some people raise some eyebrows. Tell us what this part of the group is, what it's about.
Well, I think that the people involved in it from the beginning, they grew out of something called the Pansophical Lodge, really, and that was also connected with the OTO, pre-Crowley OTO kind of thing. And then they got involved with Aleister Crowley later also, but it's a very eclectic order, so things from the East, Eastern things, Tantrism and that sort of thing comes in. The rite that I have in the book that has an overtly sexual nature is a version of the sort of 5M rite of the Panchamakra tantric rite and so forth. So it's based on that or inspired by it. And so there was, and of course then also, as we discussed several times here this evening already, this Weimar, Germany obsession with sexuality and that sort of thing was also as part of the zeitgeist of the whole movement. But so it was rooted in all of these things. And then, beyond that, though, it was a highly experiential kind of a workshop mentality as regards a lot of not just sexual things, but all kinds of magic and demonic magic and things like this that don't play a part in the rituals as they are written and performed and the normal part of it. But then they said, well, let's explore these different areas. No restrictions. We're going to do all kinds of things, but not coercing others into doing them. Say, okay, these 6 people here are really interested in this kind of thing, whatever it is. And so they would form what is called a study circle, a Studienkreis, and that group would then go and experiment with this form of magic, of magical working, and then report back and make it part of the lore of the order. Maybe it would grow from there and others would get involved, and that was the way they had an esoteric reason for doing it this way, because they said, we are delving into things which are dangerous and karmic forces will rebound upon us.
Stephen,
and so if you 6 people want to go out there, or you 5 or you 2, and do this and take this responsibility on yourselves, then that is okay.
All right, Stephen, we're going to have to take a quick break here. It's a hard break. You listen to Jason JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
The bloodwood and the desert oak, holding wrecks and boiling diesel.
Welcome back to the show. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Phone number is 844-687-7669. Tonight we're talking with Dr. Stephen Flowers about the Brotherhood of Saturn. And Stephen, before we went to break, we were talking about the sexual magic rituals. And I read your step-by-step description of what these rituals, some of them anyways, entailed. A very, very interesting series of steps and events. And what was the point of all that? How did that and those rituals help this organization further itself towards its objectives?
The objectives, as Gregorius in his poem, "Thou art thine own God," points out. Of course, the ultimate objectives are two. One is a social thing. It's the ushering in the advent of the age of Aquarius, as it were, and which would be ruled by Saturn. And but more directly and on an everyday basis, it was the initiation of the individual to the point of a sort of semi-divine being in his or her own right as a high initiate. And then, so these sexual rites were ones that caused this idea that I told you about, the centrifugal and centrifugal forces that govern their cosmological universe. These are equated then with the polarity of masculine, feminine, electromagnetic kinds of forces. And so for them, and for, I suppose, some tantric individuals and so forth, the most direct and the most practical and the most well, the word direct is the best one to use. The most direct way of accessing these forces and experiencing them, harnessing them, and using them to any purpose that the will can devise is through these sexual magical practices. And so it can be turned to any kind of end magically. It could be of a religious or mystical nature of gaining this kind of a union between these electromagnetic forces and becoming whole or more powerful as an individual. Or it could be used for some sorcerous purpose to charge a talisman or to do any kind of form of magical sorcery. And a lot of the things which, as we see in the history of ancient magic, in its best documented forms, we see like Hermeticism. I wrote this book called Hermetic Magic for Wiser many years ago. And it's based on the Greek magical papyri and all of that. And scholars will say, oh, these Greek magical papyri and all of these strange sorceries that they contain can have nothing to do with the corpus hermeticum and the high philosophical discourses that we find in that body of work, when in fact they are one and the same people. These are the practical experiments of these people, and here is a philosophical treatise by the same group of people. They're all approaching it from a hermetic perspective, but as practicing magicians will say, well, in order to know, how do I know these forces work in this way? I can sit and think and ponder and discuss with my fellow philosophers the possibilities, and I can experiment like a laboratory, like as in a laboratory, and actually experience these causes and effects through these rituals and through these magical operations, and thereby actually prove to myself how the universe is working or how it can be made to work through these secret, or as we started out this evening, occult laws. And so for them, again, being part of the time period when, in the place and time when these things were taboo, yes, but not as taboo as you would normally find up until recently, and so they felt free to experiment and dabble in this sort of a thing, and so that's how it came to be so prominent in this group, and so open, as we know, in the early days of the OTO. It was formed by Germans also. The whole sexual component of it was something people joined thinking it was a normal fraternity, a normal Masonic fraternity, and then as they went through the degree systems, all of a sudden, people are starting to bring out sexual things, and so this is the real secret, and this, of course, people are, at the time, were totally unprepared for it. Nowadays, people join these groups thinking, this is what it's all about. When can we get to that part, right? But in the old days, it was kept secret. Well, in the Fraternies Saturni, it didn't have to be because of the time period involved at the time, and the culture that they existed in. So again, it was a kind of a precursor to much later times in Western Europe and America when these things were more open. They were much more open for them, but a lot of these things were illegal. I mean, homosexuality was illegal in Germany at the time, and so forth. So they had these groups with like these study circles I told you about, where that people might experiment in that. The original OTO was not, that. Crowley turned it into that, but that was fine. That was if that's what you want to experiment in, fine and dandy. That's what you should do. But it wasn't. That's like this. Anything is mandatory. It was more experimental, and then they had their sort of formal rituals, which were more like Masonic Lodge rituals than that were performed for initiations and that sort of thing.
Stephen, there was a movie, Eyes Wide Shut, and as you're describing these things to me, I keep envisioning scenes from that film, and I'm probably silly to even suggest there's a real connection between what was shown in that film based compared to what you're talking about, but was there any connection?
Yes, of course. The movie would have been a whole lot better if they had shot it in the time period the book was written. It's a German novella called the Traumnovelle, the Dream Novella, by Arthur Schnitzler, and it's set in Vienna around the turn of the century. So that would explain, because they did, it's a lot of things that were taken from the book, obviously. Yeah. That would explain the kind of shocking reaction of the protagonist in the movie. Most of the people are going like, why is that doctor so freaked out over a bunch of an orgy, man? I mean, a bunch of rich people getting together having an orgy. What's the big deal, right? That's the kind of the approach. I mean, but the whole aura of it. If you set that in 1900, that would explain sort of the reaction of some of the characters in the movie. That were so, shocking and life-changing and that sort of thing. But that's where this person, Schnitzler, you see these things in different art forms. He wasn't necessarily involved, but he knew people who were into that sort of thing, I'm sure. Just like in the film industry in Germany in the 1920s, you see there were a lot of occultists involved in it. Albin Grau being one of them. That is the person who was responsible for the design and the whole idea behind Nosferatu.
Right.
And he was a big part of it. I have a thing written by him in here, and he was an occultist, but he was involved in the film industry. You see a film like the 1934 film *The Black Cat* by Edgar Ulmer with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and the satanic cult that is described and shown there. Well, that is pretty much taken. Edgar Ulmer was in Berlin. He was in the film industry in Berlin at the time, and sort of based his, some people say, he based his Karloff, his Hjalmar Pölzig character in The Black Cat on Aleister Crowley, of course. But he didn't really know who Aleister Crowley was, really. But even the name, Hjalmar Pölzig, is Hans Pölzig, same last name, who was a set designer for films in the Weimar period in Germany, who was involved in strange things, and strange geometries, and the use of angles and geometry for alteration of mental states and that sort of thing.
Those are some of my favorite. Those are some of my, those are some of my favorite films. Hey, we've neglected our phone lines. We're going to try to squeeze in a call or two here before we have to run out of time. This is Philip from North Carolina who has a question for Stephen. Hey, Philip, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm curious, Aleister Crowley was obviously a Satanist, and it said that he practiced sacrificing of young boys by the score, like over 100 boys. And I'm wondering, how is the Saturni fraternity any different from them, and how would they compare to, the Vril Society? I'm curious about that as well. I'll take an answer off the air.
Thanks for the question, Stephen.
I think we all know what Crowley was referring to when he said he sacrificed boys by the hundreds. Eighth degree OTO ritual of magical masturbation. Every time he shot a load, he sacrificed a boy. And he did it as many times as Ric Flair did it a day. So that's what that refers to. That's Crowley engaged in what was a tantric philosophy, has what's called the shadow language, right? In which you couch your practices or whatever it is in some kind of metaphor, and that's what that is.
Okay.
So I hate to burst people's bubble on that, but that's the way it goes. But so there we have that as far as Aleister Crowley. And the Vril Society is a fiction. It never really existed. There was books written about this Vril power. Of course, the Vril power is something that is mentioned by Edward Bulwer Lytton in his book of Vril, The Coming Race, which is the idea that there's a power, an energy, which can be generated, which is great, something like atomic energy. And the Germans did write about this, and of course they were seeking this kind of thing. But when people like these French writers that wrote The Morning of the Magicians and things like that, they rather mythologized and built up certain things of that nature, which have been not, proven to have existed as far as real, actual groups or orders or things of that nature. There was an interest in that, and there was the exploration of alternative energy sources by German scientists, of course, but that was there was no really things like type of a Brill society or order or anything like that. Gotcha. It hasn't been proven. No trace of it exists.
So the book is called The Fraternities Saturni, and again, the author is Stephen Flowers, Dr. Stephen Flowers. He's been with us tonight. We're out of time, Stephen. What other projects do you have in the works? What can people expect next from you?
Well, with Inner Traditions, next thing coming out is my book on the early 20th century German rune magicians, a new edition of Rune Might, which was written about the same time as this book on the Fraternities Saturni was written. And just momentarily here, this next week, I will be coming out with my big book on the god Odin called Wodanas, our ancestral god of sovereign wisdom. A big book on the god Odin, and then other forthcoming things with Inner Traditions are a book on the Tarot called the Magian Tarot, which is about the Mithraic interpretation of the Tarot. And I have other books. One that we were talking about, I oftentimes slip in things about horror movies. Remember I said I was a monster kid?
Yeah.
And so one of my pet projects is a book called Gothic Meditations at Midnight, which is a series of essays on the esoteric interpretations, implications, and other things of horror movies from the beginning to 1975. I cut it off at 1975 because then monster kids started making horror movies, and maybe good, maybe great, but they don't have that.
Well, we're going to have to have
Rorschach test.
We're going to have you back on, Stephen, to talk about some more of these projects. You've done a lot of fascinating stuff, and we'd like to chat about it some point.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and we look forward to talking to you again, Stephen. Have a great night now.
Okay, so we're going to take a break. We'll come back and wrap things up. It's Beyond Reality Radio with Jason and JV. Don't go away. Fraternities Saturni. Fraternities Saturni. I can do it now.
Brotherhood of Saturn.
Fraternities
Brotherhood of Saturn.
Fraternities Saturni. I can do it now. Fraternities Saturni. That's the name of the book by our guest, Dr. Stephen Flowers. And by the way, one more thing. I'm very, very pleased that the FCC does not frown upon some of those things that were said tonight. Because they were a little racy, but it was look on our faces must have been quite shocking.
So a big thank you to Stephen Flowers for coming on and talking to us about his book. And tomorrow night we've got Michael Mays, cryptid seeker and author. We'll be discussing shadow cats, the Black Panthers of North America, and we'll also be getting into Bigfoot and a lot more. If you haven't yet, head over to facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio, like the Facebook page for us, then head to beyondrealityradio.com. We can find all the stations we air on across the country. The list is constantly being added to, so check it often. You can download the free smartphone apps, which allows you to listen live, catch the show on the go, and a lot more. Or any night we're live, just listen right from the website, beyondrealityradio.com. That's going to do it for us. You listen to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll catch you all tomorrow.
All right, we entered some new territory tonight here on Beyond Reality Radio, and not just on the air, but also in the chat room. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. That was funny though, right? So, but it was an interesting conversation, and the book is very, very fascinating. By the way, it is Fraternities Saturni, the Fraternities Saturni, right there. Check it out. It's pretty cool. Hope everybody had a great weekend, and thanks for being here tonight. And we've got a week full of great programs, so we're going to have a lot of fun this weekend. No, this week. As you can tell, I've been having a rough night tonight. But anyway, thanks for being around, everybody. It's good to see everybody. You always make me laugh. So I'll talk to you all tomorrow night. Good night.